In the pre-dawn darkness at 0420 hours, 44 Ukrainian UJ-26 Beaver UAVs launched simultaneously from a concealed location in Kyiv, streaking toward a railway bridge in Luhansk, deep within Russian-controlled territory. This wasn't just any target. It was a critical artery feeding the entire Russian supply network, moving fuel, weapons, and ammunition from Luhansk into Donetsk to sustain Moscow's grinding offensive across the eastern theater. Ukraine had spent 2 months preparing this operation in near total secrecy, meticulously calculating flight corridors through terrain depressions and radar blind spots their reconnaissance had already mapped out. And honestly, the level of coordination required here was remarkable. What the Ukrainian commanders didn't realize, and what would nearly derail everything, was that Russia had quietly reinforced these critical logistics hubs with Pantsir Tur and Buk Vita air defense systems, after suffering earlier strikes against convoys heading toward Crimea. Before the Beavers could even threaten the bridge itself, they had to slip past the Nebo-M surveillance radar, a formidable multi-band system capable of detecting low-flying targets across vast distances. The Nebo-M's weakness, though, wasn't raw detection power. It was that its tracking data lacked the precision needed for independent firing solutions. It had to coordinate with other fire control radars in the integrated air defense network, exactly the gap Ukraine was gambling on. By 0424 hours, the lead Beaver formation began descending into their pre-surveilled approach corridor, optical sensors shifting into terminal guidance mode. They needed just seconds to lock onto the bridge's distinctive shape, the railway tracks, support pillars, the connection points. If the Nebo-M could be suppressed or jammed even briefly, this would transform from a raid into something far more devastating, a direct blow to Russia's ability to sustain the entire Eastern Front. Waiting beyond that early warning layer came the next nightmare, the S-350 Vityaz, a modern medium-range system Russia had quietly positioned around these key logistics points. The S-350's 50N6A radar could detect, track, assign targets, and guide its 9 M96 interceptor missiles, theoretically a perfect shield against exactly this kind of low-altitude drone attack. In theory. But the Beavers didn't cooperate with the S-350's design assumptions. Ukrainian operators forced the entire formation down to 250 feet, hugging the earth and following their pre-calculated route. At that altitude, terrain became the attacker's ally. Even the sophisticated 50N6A radar saw its detection range collapse when tracking small UAVs skimming above ground clutter, buildings, trees, and power lines. By 0426 hours, with the lead aircraft already deep into the danger zone, Russia's reaction window was evaporating fast. Any delay in relaying data from early warning to fire control compressed the interception timeline to mere minutes, sometimes just seconds. The Beaver's ultra-low altitude technique suddenly revealed its genius. The S-350 crew couldn't get a clear picture of what was coming at them. The 50N6A excels when tracking distinct targets against clean sky, but against small machines racing low through clutter, that advantage shattered. Radar signals blurred with reflections bouncing off rails, stations, power poles, buildings, and metal infrastructure surrounding the bridge. When the Beaver swarm closed to less than 2 miles, a desperately short range for the S-350, the system found itself in a bind. Vityaz was built to intercept low targets and react faster than many long-range systems. Yet it still needed time to confirm, classify, issue firing orders, and guide missiles to intercept. At this range, every processing step compressed into an impossibly tight window. Even the Pantsir S1 short-range layer couldn't rescue the situation anymore. From detection to launch meant target confirmation, data processing, locking, weapon rotation, and missile firing. A sequence that demanded time the Beavers simply wouldn't grant. Flying at 100 miles per hour at a 1-mile detection range left the Pantsir crew perhaps a few seconds to respond. At 04:28 hours, the first Beaver formation punched straight into the air defense zone, targeting the radars and interception positions. As the primary defensive layer fractured, the remaining aircraft drove through the opening, racing toward the railway bridge. Minutes later, the area descended into chaos. Air defense fire erupted skyward. Radar signals scattered. The surviving Beavers continued driving toward their objective, and the strike had become something larger than a bridge destruction. It aimed directly at Russia's ability to move the fuel, weapons, and ammunition, sustaining their entire eastern push. That was only the opening move. By 04:30 hours, as smoke still rose from the first air defense site, the next Ukrainian drone wave closed on the Luhansk railway bridge. Thick fog blanketed the region, compressing visibility to almost nothing and wrapping everything in pale white obscurity. Russian defenses shifted to high alert. Pantsir S1 crews activated systems, staring tensely at radar screens, bracing for the next assault. What they didn't grasp was that this dense fog was inadvertently handing Ukraine another advantage. Abnormal signals immediately cluttered the scope. A single target, yet the signal stuttered, sharp, then faint, seeming to shift position constantly within the radar noise. Right, then left. 400 feet, then suddenly 2,000 feet. In reality, it was one Beaver threading through fog at low level. But high humidity and limited visibility made detection, identification, and targeting exponentially harder. For Pantsir crews, every reaction second became precious. A delay of just a few seconds could let the target slide deeper into the defensive zone, opening another opportunity for Ukraine's attack. Then, a second problem erupted on the Russian side. The short-range surveillance radar supporting the bridge area, designed for better conditions, began failing when a sudden heavy rainstorm swept across Luhansk. Thick rain cut through the defensive sector, transforming the observation background into chaos. Small, low-flying signals flickered amid ground interference, rail echoes, bridge pillar reflections, and surrounding structures. The Beavers, flying low through downpour, became far harder to spot accurately. But the biggest obstacle hit when Pantsir S1 entered interception mode. With visibility crushed and target signals unstable, Russian crews needed an extra 2 seconds to confirm, lock, and fire. Meanwhile, Ukraine's UJ-26 Beavers adapted instantly to these conditions. They were engineered to hold stable flight through bad weather, with minimal dependence on complex control inputs during the final phase, maintaining their approach rhythm, even cutting through heavy rain. Sensors on the lead aircraft corrected course, tracking the bridge shape, rails, support pillars, and transport route connection. Finally, one Pantsir S1 system locked on and opened fire. 9 M96E6 missiles screamed from launchers, accelerating to Mach 3.8, tearing through rain toward the approaching formation. Fire streaks split the downpour. Within seconds, proximity fuses detonated. 8 Ukrainian UAVs fell from the sky. But that wasn't enough to stop the attack. When range became too tight for optimal missile use, Pantsir S1 switched to cannon fire. Two 30mm 2A38M automatic cannons swung violently, pouring dense bursts toward the remaining UAVs. A red-hot curtain of bullets tore the air, destroying 4 more Beavers just before the final defensive zone. But 6 broke through. They raced straight into the railway bridge in Luhansk. Explosions hammered the bridge deck, tracks, and critical load-bearing points. A 120 pounds per square inch shockwave hurled metal fragments, concrete, and ballast stone skyward. One railway section tore open, while black smoke rolled upward through the rain. By around 04:30, 4 hours, chaos consumed the bridge area. Russian defenses had launched 8 interceptors, fired heavy cannon bursts, and brought down 12 UAVs during the approach. But 6 Beavers still pierced the air defense and struck the target, leaving the critical Luhansk railway bridge badly damaged. Yet Ukraine's plan continued beyond that explosion. Behind the first wave, the final 14 Beavers received new intelligence. A Russian train loaded with weapons and ammunition had just passed through the area, continuing toward the front line. If that train reached its destination, its cargo would immediately flow into the hands of Russian units fighting in the east. The mission shifted instantly. These final Beavers accelerated to their maximum 120 miles per hour, abandoning their original approach route and following the railway line, now drowning in heavy rain. Ukraine had decided to stop that train before it could deliver weapons, ammunition, and supplies to Russian forces at the front. Ukraine was about to demonstrate that previous success didn't hinge on luck. The real advantage lay in how the attack was designed to shatter Russia's very defensive logic. The next wave proved it perfectly. By 04:36 hours, after the Luhansk railway bridge had already been hit, the final 24 Beavers continued following the railway line through downpour. Their target was the Russian weapons and ammunition train that had just passed the area and was still moving toward the Eastern Front. By this point, Russia had deployed almost every defensive layer, protecting this critical logistics corridor. S-350 Vityaz systems formed the medium-range interception layer. Tor and Pantsir S-1 systems handled close-range defense against small, low-flying targets appearing suddenly. Electronic warfare systems jammed navigation and communication across the approach zone. In theory, this was a defensive network dense enough to turn any drone strike into costly attrition. Then, 24 UJ-26 Beavers appeared on screen. From that moment, the network's weakness became apparent. They didn't rush from one direction. They split into 5 separate groups, approaching from different angles at different altitudes with different rhythms. A pre-calculated attack style, specifically designed to overload the defensive system. When multiple small targets appear simultaneously on different approach axes, radars, command posts, and interception systems are forced to constantly shift target priority, switch tracking direction, and divide firepower. The first group flew low along the railway line, forcing nearby radars to focus on the direct approach. The second group shifted to the flank, pulling Pantsir S-1 fire away from the main axis. The third group stayed farther back, adding pressure to target classification. The remaining 2 groups circled through terrain, waiting for the moment the air defense stretched too thin. Within 30 seconds, the network designed for tight coordination was compressed to its absolute limit. Russia's problem was fundamental. Theoretical capability didn't translate to battlefield effectiveness. The S-350 could track multiple targets within 150 miles. Pantsir S-1 was flexible, capable of using both missiles and cannon against targets at any range. But when 5 Beaver groups used swarm tactics, constantly shifting formations, sometimes spreading wide, sometimes compressing, the entire system was forced to continuously recalculate tracking data, priority directions, and firing solutions. when the S-350 radar operator detected 24 signals racing toward the train. Data immediately transferred to the command control room. Orders to activate the Pol 21 electronic warfare system followed instantly. This system specializes in jamming satellite navigation and was deployed to cover the reinforcement route, designed to throw off GPS-dependent UAV flight paths. The effect came almost immediately. The lead Beaver group lost GPS signals and drifted diagonally right away from the railway. Their flight direction destabilized on the control screen. After just 1 minute, the Beaver swarm closed to around 10 miles from the train. The train continued toward the front. Ukrainian operators immediately switched to autonomous mode. The Beavers used inertial navigation combined with structure recognition and railway tracking, no longer entirely dependent on external guidance signals. They followed rail shapes, power poles, small stations, railway curves, and the train's movement to self-correct their flight path. But a new problem emerged. The train was a moving target. The probability of a direct hit dropped dramatically. A delay of just seconds during the dive could send a UAV into empty space behind a cargo car, or detonate too early beside the tracks without stopping the train. Ukraine changed strategy. One Beaver group accelerated, moving ahead of the train instead of attacking it directly. Their target became the railway section ahead. If the moving train couldn't be hit, cut off its route first. The Beavers lowered altitude, hugged the rail line, and raced toward the blocking point. The lead aircraft's sensor locked onto track ahead of the locomotive. 2 parallel steel rails, ballast layer underneath, the connection area where the rail bed rose slightly. Seconds later, the first Beaver pitched down. The explosion struck one rail directly, bending steel from its support. The shock wave tore through ballast, throwing stone, soil, and metal fragments along the line. The second aircraft hit right beside, widening the destroyed zone and knocking the wooden sleepers beneath out of position. In an instant, the track section ahead was no longer continuous. One rail bent and warped, the other shifted off its axis. The rail bed tore open into a dangerous gap. Vibrations traveled back along the rails. Inside the locomotive cabin, the Russian crew realized their route ahead was destroyed. Emergency braking engaged. Steel wheels ground against rails in a long, piercing screech, while the entire heavy train lurched forward. Sudden braking force pressing through every cargo car. Speed dropped rapidly. The train had transformed from a difficult moving target into a heavy, slow, nearly trapped mass, sitting directly on the reinforcement route. At less than 0.5 miles, video signals from the Beavers broke apart severely. The control screen showed only white static patches, shadows of railway tracks, locomotive flames, cargo cars appearing and disappearing. Russian jamming pressed hard against the video transmission channel, forcing Ukrainian crews to fly almost entirely on inertial data, the rail line map, and the target position sent back by Group 1 before striking the track. Below, the train sat immobilized after the track ahead was damaged. Cargo cars had slammed their weight toward the locomotive. Steel wheels ground in long, piercing shrieks, while the entire train body shook violently under sudden braking force. Russian escort soldiers immediately jumped down on both sides, looking for cover, while firing AK-12s skyward. But against UAVs diving at 120 miles per hour, the aiming window lasted only a few seconds. The first Beaver group struck the locomotive. The lead aircraft pitched into the power compartment, where the engine cluster, fuel lines, electrical system, and main control panel concentrated. The roughly 50-pound warhead detonated against steel skin. Pressure at impact exceeded 100 pounds per square inch, enough to tear open thin armor panels, sever electrical cables, and destroy fuel lines. Fire erupted from the locomotive's nose. The engine lost traction and became a heavy obstacle, locking the entire train in place on the reinforcement route. Immediately, the second group dived into the third cargo car, carrying flammable fuel. When the penetrating warhead detonated, hot fragments and blast pressure ripped the car body open, driving heat into the storage compartment inside. Fuel vapor ignited instantly. An orange-red fire column blasted from both sides, stub onto ballast, and spread along the rails. The burning zone temperature exceeded 800 degrees Celsius, hot enough to burn away protective paint, bend thin steel, and bury the surrounding area in thick black smoke. But Ukraine didn't just want the train on fire. They wanted secondary explosions. The third group continued targeting car number 12 in the middle, where ammunition and military supplies sat. Smoke from the third car had blocked most visibility. The Beaver's camera caught only light streaks, cargo car shadows, and trembling rails. The operator no longer needed a perfect frame. Distance measurements, the marked car number, and railway line direction held the dive path steady. The Beaver cut through smoke edges, then slammed directly into car number 12's body. The fragmentation blast ripped open metal skin, driving hot fragments into the storage compartment. Ammunition crates, propellant, and military supplies scattered, creating multiple ignition points. Scattered explosions echoed, short and sharp, as ammunition inside heated. One side of car number 12 burst open. Flames licked toward neighboring cars. The major chain explosion hadn't yet reached the train's rear, so the final group kept diving. Their target was car number 18, deeper toward the back, where remaining military weapons lay trapped after emergency braking. If this car was hit, fire could pull the entire rear section with it. One Beaver dropped even lower, skimming through black smoke rolling from car number 12. In final seconds, the image nearly disappeared completely, but the inertial system kept the aircraft on dive path. Then, car number 18's shadow appeared between two fire streaks. The Beaver drove straight into the car's body. A larger explosion roared immediately. Blast pressure and hot fragments punched into the cargo compartment, igniting new fire points in the rear cars. Flames ran along the rear section, pulling secondary explosion after another behind. Steel doors blew outward. Red-hot metal fragments flew into the air. The shockwave knocked several cargo cars off rail alignment. By 0441 hours, the Russian supply train was almost completely disabled. The locomotive had been destroyed. The third car burned violently. Car number 12 had been ripped open. Car number 18 triggered a chain of explosions spreading toward the rear. Heavy rain still poured down, but it couldn't extinguish fires fed by fuel, flammable supplies, and ammunition inside. The railway line, once used to move fuel, weapons, and ammunition to the front, had become a long strip of fire running through Luhansk. What remained was a blackened locomotive, deformed cargo cars, rails warped by heat, and a Russian logistics route stopped dead before supplies could reach the eastern battlefield. But the real value wasn't merely the destroyed train or damaged railway bridge. To be frank, Ukraine had struck directly at one of Russia's most critical vulnerabilities: its ability to maintain continuous supply flows to the Eastern Front. The railway lines in Luhansk and Donetsk are logistical arteries carrying fuel, artillery shells, armored vehicles, repair components, and reinforcements from rear to front. When one bridge is damaged and a weapons train stops burning on the railway, The damage doesn't end with scorched cargo cars. It creates a chain effect cascading across Russia's entire operational rhythm in Donbass. First, Russia loses supply speed. A military train moves far more fuel and ammunition than truck convoys. When the railway is cut, Moscow must move cargo by road, but truck transport is more expensive and far riskier. Second, this strike increases pressure on Russia's air defense network. If Ukraine can use long-range UAVs to strike bridges, rail lines, and trains inside occupied territory, Russia must allocate more Pantsir, Tor, S-350, and electronic warfare systems protecting logistics infrastructure. Third, Ukraine displays a clear shift in operational thinking. They're not just destroying individual Russian units in trenches. They're shifting toward wearing down the entire system, keeping those units alive. Railway bridges, fuel depots, ammunition trains, transport junctions, and supply routes are becoming priority targets. The political implications matter too. When logistics routes in Luhansk, Donetsk, and connection points with Crimea face constant threat, Russia faces more than military damage. Moscow must explain why rear areas once considered safe can now be hit so deeply and accurately. This directly affects troop confidence, strains the command structure, and undermines the battlefield control image Moscow wants to project. For Kyiv, the message is crystal clear. Ukraine isn't only defending or counterattacking on the front line, it's isolating each Russian force grouping by striking the supply system, keeping them alive. If ammunition arrives slowly, fuel becomes scarce. Armored vehicles become harder to repair, and trains can't move safely. Then Russian pressure on the eastern battlefield gradually weakens over time. That's why the strike on the Luhansk railway bridge and supply train signifies far more than a morning explosion. It's part of a larger campaign transforming Russia's rear area into a zone that's no longer safe, stretching Russian air defenses, disrupting the transport system, and strengthening Ukraine's position at the negotiating table. If you found this attack impressive, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the latest military analyses. Leave your comment below. Which logistics route do you think Ukraine should strike next to force Russia to reduce pressure sooner and bring peace closer? Goodbye.